soon.
And we are live. A few minutes. Seriously,
Yes,
just
we
give
are
it a few
live.
minutes. Yes, give it a few minutes. Sheesh.
No, I mean we're live.
I know we're live. Okay, Ashley, talk.
Ah,
More.
talking.
Say more.
What else do you want me to say?
You guys can
What
hear
do I
that.
say?
How's it coming in? Happy?
She should speak some more.
Okay, I'll speak first.
How about you give the opening?
Give the opening?
Yeah.
Hello, welcome to the Spoken Word with Raz. We're here with some devils named Happy. Go ahead and say hi.
Hello, people.
There you are. And Morgan.
Yo.
And then also the dummy named Raz.
Insulting me on my own show.
Yes, you told me to do the intro. You should have expected this.
Yes, because we're trying to do the testing.
I'm Ashley, by the way.
Yeah, she sounds a lot better.
Okay, so it's not cutting out in and out like it was last one?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, so welcome to the Spoken Word. We got the whole crew together. Hello, everyone.
Hey.
Good evening.
Oh, man. How was your guys' week?
Wet.
What do you mean wet?
Overly wet.
How
I
was
said
Short,
wet.
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 W-E-T, wet.
Wet. Got it. Got it.
Like it is today.
Cool. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
raining
I
pretty
could
hard.
do with less. I could do with less water and less thunder and less lightning and less power outages.
Hopefully you'll be fine during.
Yeah, it should be fine.
Less jinxing it.
I mean, you know, how it goes.
Oh, man. And what about you, Morgan?
I've just been really busy. I've been doing picking up some extra shifts at work, so I'm feeling my age, shall we say?
You're feeling your age, huh? I'm busy
Yeah.
with that same thing.
Yeah. I have to say, it's been a whole summer of really being grounded. That getting my feet back down to earth to remember that I am now on my way to, I'm on the decline now. I think they say you reach that certain point in your 20s and everything after that is just a downward spiral. So, yeah, and up until this point, I've been doing a really good job of putting off the feeling that I am on that spiral. But right now I am feeling like it. So, yeah, it's I'm certainly not as durable as I used to be. Yay!
Haven't
But
got a
other
lot
than
to
that, I don't
Yeah,
have anything exciting to report.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of curious on Happy's end of this because he's the oldest one in here, and what is your health report on all? Like, no, I'm actually curious about this.
How do you feel today?
Well, the thing is,
My
like,
health report.
what I mean by that is, like, for me, they say, and guys, like my dad and everyone's like, when you hit your 30s and stuff like that, you really do start, like, at first, that first few years of the 30s, it's, you're still like, you just hit your peak, right? Like the peak, right? And it really is just kind of downhill, but like just a lot of weird things that you have to do, and you have to take care of yourself a lot more to keep,
Well,
what about you?
as far as that goes, my knees hurt. My shins hurt. And I had to help lift a 120-ish pound server up to get carried to a data center day before yesterday, and I'm still feeling that.
Kilos
It's supposed to be a 4-person job, and it was 2 of us.
Ugh.
Well, how many kilos was it? Because it was 120 pounds. 2 people can handle that. That's not a problem. But what's
120 pounds empty.
Oh,
yeah, I mean,
That server had like some 40-ish hard drives,
oh.
big ones.
okay, so you're looking
Yeah.
probably closer to 2. Well, hard drives aren't
Yeah.
super heavy, but still, you put enough of it. So you're looking at
It's
like
about a kilo
160
each, so
Yeah, so
at least a
Cut-
kilo each. So 200 pounds at least.
yeah, right, because you were talking about server. Is it? But
Yeah.
a lot of times, if it's 4 but weight isn't your problem. It's I don't know how awkward that. Like I don't know what the server
Yeah.
like the server box looks like. So if it's really awkward, then yeah, it might
I
require
can
more than that.
I can totally tell you the model, and you should be able to figure out how bad it is.
I got a recommendation for you. We use them at my job, and honestly, made life so much easier. They make these straps, this vest strap thing.
Oh yeah,
that you-
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I showed it to you when I was working too. Like I showed them to you.
Yeah.
But they're so helpful because it puts all the weight into so it lets you stand and distribute the weight a lot easier. So
Yeah.
makes life so much easier.
Yeah, we basically got a little bit lucky because in the end we didn't have enough space to put it on any shelves, so it just went to the floor.
Right.
Yay.
Oh.
Right.
Honestly,
Oh.
fuck that server because that server is about to get replaced in like 2 months.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
If not for the fact that the room had to be cleared of the server, that thing would have stayed there until either it died or we trashed it.
I think the one thing for me that finally caught up to me, like I can't do the thing where I could stay up all night, those things like that. Like I can't do that anymore at all. Like I'm at the point where I should probably start taking naps. Like legitimately.
Naps are
Old
the best.
man.
Huh?
Old
Nah.
man.
No, you don't even know what you're talking about, love. Naps are the one that I say all the time. Like, I feel bad that as a kid I gave naps such a hard time. I was so against them as a child, and
Right. Well, I think for me it's so much that that for me it was just you have so much energy and stuff, but a lot of times I couldn't sleep. Oh, did we lose Morgan? I think we lost Morgan.
Maybe. But
Yeah,
yeah,
Morgan.
I posted a picture. I posted a picture of the server,
Oh,
the
that thing's
similar
awkward as
model
fuck.
on the. Yeah, it's basically got 4 handles, 2 handles on each side, and it's wonky as fuck. It's
Fuck that.
filled to the brim with fucking hard drives. I think it was used on a project about epilepsy detection, like 15
Right.
years ago.
Right. Welcome back, Morgan.
Like-
Are you back?
yeah, I don't know what happened then. It was like every time I put my phone back to my ear, it just all the sound dropped out, and I pulled it away, and all the sound came back, and I got caught in a little matrix loop. Then it was fine. I'm back in the room. Don't worry.
Okay. We are going to definitely solve that issue with you. You need a good, just a good, little hookup, headphones with a mic on it.
It's fine. I'm on it. Don't worry. It's on my list. It's in the next few weeks of something that I am going to achieve. So don't worry. I'm on it.
Since we're in Europe, I actually do have a brand I can recommend.
I've already been recommended all sorts of fantastic things, so I am going to chase up with that.
Okay, I mean, what brand are you thinking?
Well, what I can't remember what it was that you suggested to me. I've got it written down somewhere, but that.
Oh, it's the Kingston HyperX Stinger.
Yeah.
The corded.
That one.
The corded one. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
probably the best ones that I've used, or just straight thing out on a phone. Happy, it's the one I used for a long time. If you remember last year.
Oh yeah.
When I
remember.
when I would go driving and stuff like that. Yeah. So,
Oh no, I was going to get the one to hook up to the actual computer, the actual proper
it works for
microphone.
both. You can work it for both. It can work both. Oh, right. You have an actual proper microphone. You just don't have a good head. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I'm on,
basically
but I'm on it.
use a Mars Gaming headset, which has the headset itself. The microphone is detachable, and the headset connects to a small thingy, which has volume control and so on, that connects via USB to the PC.
Yeah.
Right.
So I've
Isn't
got
it,
options.
isn't it kind of amazing how easy it is to get all this set up now? Like, even if you think about like my setup, which is a little more expensive than your guys's, it still only cost me a little over $400 for the whole setup.
Yeah.
When you go back 10 years, can you imagine how much it was to get the level of quality just 5 years ago, the level of quality we have now, even with you guys using a phone and like, that's insane.
Oh yeah,
know?
taking leaps and bounds every couple of years, and I drop my phone then just to prove the fact that it's just so easy.
Right. But oh man. Yeah, I mentioned earlier I had a topic to talk about with you guys and everything, but there is another topic I also had to talk that I wanted to talk about. Another thing, dealing a little bit with what we're getting into, but it's something that I've really been struggling with recently,
Mm.
and it is that sense of being, especially if you're injured or like as a man. And I know a lot of people have talked about this, and I don't think people really comprehend. Everyone needs some form of purpose, for men or women, right? But
Mhm.
for a man, it doesn't matter if he's a bachelor or something like that. You have to be doing something to not feel useless. You know, in relationships, like there is a thing with a lot of women. Like again, I get it. I think it's dumb, but I get the whole thing of the social, like how we built society with social and everything like that. Like when I was younger, it wasn't. I don't. I remember people would just get together for love. I don't think that's good enough, but my point is like there was other things drawing people together. Now it's absolutely financial and all that stuff. And if a guy is making less money, or if he loses that, like that can lose respect in a relationship from the person he's with. That's a
Yeah.
real thing.
I mean, there is an argument still that even through all of the progress that we've made, we are still very instinctual animals, and primarily what it comes down to when you've got women looking for men is security, provider. It used to be, can you go out and hunt and kill? Now it's, can you make enough money to pay for the bills, sort of thing. But that changes. That is skewed when you add feminism into it. Like, that's where the culture goes horribly wrong. Because if that was what we were looking for intrinsically, then most women would be quite happy. But they're not.
Well, my problem is not. I'm gonna take feminism out of the problem and actually look and more. I've been doing a lot of this stuff. Like that's just an exasperation of what's been happening over. The reality is, when you go back, if you take like human, like what has actually happened, and this is a pretty big thing. Back in the day, yes, men would go to war, protect women, all that stuff, right? And part of it was women could have kids, right? But do you know how often women would die in childbirth?
Yes.
How many children would die in childbirth?
Yes. It was the biggest killer of women and children up until the last 100 years, when we actually started making major advancements in sort of maternity care. Yeah, it's a very real fear of mine, as you well know, with my friend having gone through pregnancy earlier in the summer, and you know how touch and go I was about that. I was very, very scared.
Yep. The usual meme about how the average how long people lived on average
Yeah.
Is
Why?
basically if you lived long enough to go through the first years of your life, then you would live a relatively longish life. 60s was normal,
Yeah.
70s was normal. But the number of people that died young, the number of kids that died young, drastically lowered the average age.
Yeah.
Mm.
Again, that's why people had a bunch of kids back in the day. Like that, but that was the trade-off. Men went to war because women were the childbirther, and had to go through that, and that chances of death were incredibly higher. So now you have a guy. Now you have men also
Yeah,
reaching.
yeah, but
It was just rougher. But again, that's just kind of the social
yeah,
trade-off,
but
right?
not so fun fact. This
Yeah.
still happens today in the continent we all know about,
Right.
Africa.
Yeah. Yeah.
This
That's
is
what I was.
still the point in Africa. A lot of
Yeah.
kids are born, a lot of kids die, and it is what it is.
And really, a big part of it is just doing normal. Like again, I want to point out the guy who found out if you washed hands doing childbirth, it, actually drastically increased the chance of the child living the 1800s because we didn't know but that might be the case. But I'm just talking about in Western. Yes, the third world countries are still having incredible amounts of problems. Um, and part of it is lack of education. There's a number of things that I do not want to get into. That's just not the topic today.
Yeah.
But the point that I'm trying to make here is that isn't a problem anymore.
No.
And so people are having less kids, which again, that's pretty normal. Again, the quality of life. You can have kids in your 30s. You don't have to start having kids when you're 16 because there's the possibility that most of your kids will die.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but having,
Like,
at least for women, having kids in their 30s is still a somewhat risky proposition.
that's not
I don't know.
not really anymore. Not today.
It's not
No.
as bad, but it's still a risky proposition.
So most of my friends are doing that.
Yeah, it's pretty common
Yeah.
today. Like that's my whole thing is it's pretty common today. My point that I was trying to make is that that is something you are able to,
Mm.
so society changed and the role for women has changed. But and this goes into my biggest thing. The problem for men hasn't. And we have been seeing a drastic reduction for men and boys. Starting back 20 years ago, from about 20 years.
But that's reasonably explained by the fact that society has the conditions for men basically stagnated.
Yep.
But large contributions to the status of women have been done.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
There
again,
hasn't been a good balance between how things improved for women and then how men were supposed to adapt to it.
not just the adapting to it, to the status of women. It was when this problem started happening, when it finally became apparent of what was happening and stuff like that. It is being ignored. It absolutely is. And I do go into the thing that men have been kind of seen as disposable. And it's not like and I don't mean that we say this, right? That men are disposable and stuff like that, but it's not like a thought where we go, oh, fuck men. I mean, there are certain people that do that, but it was just, this is what men were supposed to do. They do the most dangerous jobs. They are the ones that fight. And there is a natural protectiveness, embodied in a biological thing. And yeah, society, and again, we can say it's society and programming and stuff like that, but there are things that like part of being masculine and stuff like that needs looked at. And again, we can make choices. That's the great thing about the human brain, humanity, and stuff like that is we can make opposite choices of the stuff. But instead of looking into why are suicide rates so high for men drastically in the last 10 years, and then during COVID went up even higher in both Europe and specifically England, Britain and the US. Why is it that nobody wants to address these things? Why is it that men have that they're like also are also have high number of domestic abuse done to men but is ignored? And again, the problem isn't to take away from women. I absolutely not. There are a lot of still, there's still people and everything like that, but they get all the attention. Again, one of the biggest problems I have is testicular cancer kills men at the the same or even just a little less than breast cancer kills women, but it's not talked about. It gets half the funding than breast cancer. And when they do
Yeah.
do things, to bring awareness to it, I do remember commercials back in the the only time I remember testicular cancer talked about was the early 2000s, which was a video about fondling your balls.
Now, we had a big movement over in the UK specifically for that reason, because they do an awful lot to push for breast cancer, and I understand that. That's where I don't know if you ever heard of Movember.
Yeah.
That became a thing. Yeah, where they would, and it was a nationwide charity event where all the guys would grow their beards out, and you just didn't shave for a whole month, and people donated money towards you, and it all went towards the Men's Testicular Cancer Trust, which was a really big drive, and it went really well, and it went for a good couple of years. But like most things, it fizzles out.
It's actually still here. I mean, but I actually remember, I remember when this was doing it in the US, you had a bunch of people calling it sexist, literally.
I just
Again,
thought it
it's
was
the
a
normal
meme.
thing. Oh well, then there's No Nut November, which was a joke made on it, but also raised money. They ran at things like that. No Nut November was also a play off of that, but was for that
Yeah.
too. Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of No Shave November. Of these things. But anytime it seems that anything that would help men is, and again, it's not attacked by normal people, it's the vocal minorities who do have power. This is the biggest lie that I ever had. Oh, these are just a minority of them, and yet they're the ones that have the ear.
This is what I was just about to say. I
Yep.
think the problem lies in the fact that the focal point isn't, because the focal point on these issues all over the media, which is what we all consume every day, is focusing on this very small minority of very loud voices. The average person thinks that is a majority consensus, and they're on the outsides and they must conform to it, and well, that's just what's right now, and go along with this sort of status quo, when in actual fact that isn't what the culture is. It's just what you're being told the culture is, and therefore it leads to that's what the culture is. It's a horrible sort of loop that just keeps going on. No, sorry, loop was probably the worst word that I could have chosen. I was trying to think of something clever, but yeah.
So we're now in a state where, and again, going into all this stuff like that, and I realize this a lot. We're in a time period where, again, going back to a lot of these boys and stuff like that, and this is, and it doesn't matter about race. Again, these problems are happening in the Black community and the Asian in America, and doesn't matter, right? Especially places that don't have strong family values too. But you have men and boys who, specifically, let's go to young men, because those are my biggest target. For this, because again, there's a lot of people my age who are getting fucked over, and so, but basically, these younger people are coming up into this world inheriting these problems, right? And again, I want to point out, it's again the whole thing about wanting to get anything that would be there to help them is attacked relentlessly. Now, some of them deserve to be attacked. I do have a big problem in the pickup artist, thing. But there's a great video, by the way, I recommend watching, which talks about the things that they give you are useful when you start. It's just that you stick around if you stick around too long. It's the thing, because you can't just tell somebody to be confident. You have to give them tools, right? So it's
Yeah.
great. So you have all these people going out and going, be yourself and all this other stuff, and that is the real rule, is to be yourself. But there are things about you that probably do have to change, but you change them for yourself, not for some stupid, not just for the goal of getting, hooking up with somebody.
Yeah.
Again, I've always liked the rule. I think, and you guys have heard me say this multiple times. All right, so this is your problems. What are you going to do to fix it? What are the steps we're going to take to fix this problem? Right?
Right?
Yeah.
But all the people who go after, and again, I have a major issue with the community, but again, they fall into the same problem of there is nobody there to they're just not getting the lessons and stuff like that. Like one of the other things that is really, really bad, and again, this is happening with both men and women, but happening really heavily with guys, is the inability to talk to women, or people. This right here, the inability to actually communicate.
I have no comments.
And the worst part is, the reason they don't want to communicate is because they don't know how, but the problem is you only learn to communicate by doing so. But another reason they're losing that ability to communicate is the level of education when it comes to reading and writing is that far down.
Yep.
Like, it's so bad that Ashley refused to read anything for a long time.
To be fair, that was mainly because my mom was an absolute dictatorial about reading. She wanted to be a librarian. And oh my fucking god.
I could empathise with you. Hang on, I've got to shout out because my mum was an English teacher and a history teacher, an RE teacher, and a drama teacher. So
you understand what
our
mean.
house was a library, and she wanted
Yes.
nothing more for me to be a reader. And it wasn't until she'd been gone for nearly 10 years that I started picking up books and started really getting into reading, because it wasn't being forced down my throat all the day, every day. And I was like, oh, I actually want to do this now. I kind of wish I hadn't. I kind of wish I kept some of her books now, sort of thing. So yeah, no, I
Right.
empathise with that one. That's not an education thing. I think that's sometimes an over-education thing, where you just had something shoved down your throat so much that you're just like, nah.
And it gets to a point that you're just like, no.
Well,
Stop.
Yeah.
I mean that's an issue, but I would.
But that might be our white
I'm a
privilege.
dictator with this. Yeah, but I'm a dictator when it comes to this. Maybe it's because I think part of it is just not explaining to somebody the importance of again, the whole point of reading and all that stuff is the biggest thing to teaching us to communicate. You don't know what words to use to express yourself. Well, there's all these great books. It's not just about words, right? It's not just about the words. It's how they're constructed. How a writer can literally take you into a situation, right?
Yeah, I
but
think
when you live with somebody who uses all of these words and has such a love for them, you don't need to read all the books. You've got like a walking thesaurus next to you.
Yeah, but she
I
doesn't.
think
No,
I think
but
the
again,
problem
my
is
mom wanted to be a librarian, and she auto-corrected me every time I spoke to her.
Okay, that's fair. No, that's
Sorry, what were you saying, Happy?
Sorry.
I was saying that one of the biggest problems nowadays is, I think it's mostly on the side of getting kids to read is less about telling them what books to read and just getting them to find something they find interesting to read.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I stand by that. Even when I was a rebel against reading, I did find a few series that I ended up really liking, and I actually would continue reading.
No, I
think-
mean,
yeah.
it's. I think it's very simple to get kids interested in reading certain types of things because they have context for it. For example, Lord of the Rings is a very well written work,
The,
But it is
which is
hard
perfectly
work.
usable to get kids to read because the story is interesting.
I think
It's
I
hard,
think, I
but
disagree. I
that's-
disagree. I disagree with Lord of the Rings. I agree with The Hobbit being the first. The Hobbit's what kind of because again, The Hobbit's a little easier to read, and it's
yeah.
It,
But when I said Lord of the Rings, I mean the series,
oh, okay.
But-
not just the 3 books.
Right.
And I've also
mean-
got a opinion on this one too. As someone who did go through school where everyone fucking hated reading, I saw people actually go into Harry Potter because there was a lot and it's Harry fucking Potter. And I see that one being a good example because it's not that hard of a, but it's also something to get you interested in starting higher things.
I actually agree with that.
Yeah.
I think there's a number of them that I recommend. Like again, I'm glad that we had all the classics that I had to read growing up, like Where the Red Fern Grows, and there is a lot of good classic children's literature that's not 1984 and stuff that you get into high school that really helped me advance what I liked, and it wasn't always fantasy. It's just good stories are good stories.
Yeah,
I don't
I agree.
know. I don't know what they do now. Like I don't know what they're being taught now and everything like that. And again, they're trying to get rid of like a lot of those stuff. Like when you're in high school, they're trying to get rid of brave stuff from being, you know.
Good luck.
Yeah.
What's that?
So
Good
good
luck.
luck.
Well, to be fair, they've been pretty effective at it.
No, not over here. I mean, it was still there was still wall displays up at my son's school in the last few years when I went to parents' evenings for 1984. So they've still been studying it up until just pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
Here anyway, but obviously it's a different world over there, and there are things that are literatures that in certain parts of America that are considered all kinds of evil.
Yeah, I know
And-
1984 was still being done at my school. And yeah, and some other ones too. Like
Animal Farm and
yeah,
stuff like that.
that was the I was like, fuck, what was the name of
Animal
that one?
Farm
Yeah.
is a fucking classic. It's one of my favorite, legitimately.
No, I actually loved for
brilliant.
some reason that was one that actually did stick with me. I actually read it for that class.
I would argue that Animal Farm's probably the most popular. You can talk 1984 and all that, but I would actually say Animal Farm is the most popular
Yeah.
of that genre
Yeah.
of things, and it's because who wrote it again? I'm trying to remember.
It's Orwell. It's George
It was
Orwell
Orwell.
again.
Yeah.
Yep, it
I
was
was supposed to say George, but then I was like,
Yeah, it was
what?
Orwell. But how Orwell wrote that versus 1984 is just, it's so good.
It is.
In all fairness, I don't think it was only recently that 1984 made a bit of a resurgence. Up until that point, I don't think I'd even heard of it until about sort of 5-6 years ago, and then I started looking into it and was like, oh, I'm going to read this now, blah blah blah, and then read it. But up until that point, it was always Animal Farm was the one that I'd always had referenced, and it's definitely more prominent in my education. Animal Farm was more prominent.
So a lot of mine for these books was college, was when I got into not high school. Again, I had a very turbulent high school life, so it gets complicated. But for me, it was college where I finally read Fahrenheit 451. Highly recommend that one. Brave New World. The most dangerous game. If you guys have ever read that one.
Of course, who hasn't?
Me.
The Heart of
Oh,
Darkness.
shit.
I very much recommend. I very much recommend being The Heart of Darkness. That's a very good book. And yeah, and then when you get into modern day, you have things like A Scanner Darkly that I highly recommend to people. You know,
Who?
Scanner Darkly.
Scanner
They made a movie.
Darkly.
They made a movie of it some years ago
Right, okay.
where it was all done like in like 3D, like real people, but and it was to give this. We should watch. We should do a movie night watching all of us
that's a
and
good idea.
do a you know.
Yeah. I want to talk about one class so like I said, I refuse to read at all, anything, anytime. And I actually succeeded in this because what I would do is different English and writing classes and so on and so forth. If it ever said like, "Oh, we need proof that you've been reading, so you're going to have this little questionnaire each week or something like that, where you talk about where you're at in your book or a summary of a chapter or something like that." I would take books that I've already read and say, yeah, you know. And there was only one class that I actually ended up reading new books in. And I want to say it was both in part of the teacher and the way he taught, because it was AP Literature, which sounds boring as fuck and very grinding on someone like me who refuses to read. But just to give an idea of this teacher, he was a drama teacher before we didn't have that class anymore because no one wanted to do it. And he also did different language arts classes as well. And this guy spoke his mind about literally everything. If something happened to the staff that was affecting students, he would say, yeah, they were all fucking stupid. But anywho, and
I think
he was definitely hard on us to make sure we were doing work. He would encourage us to speak up, speak our mind, and answer, and all that. And would make jokes so it wasn't as bad. But, you know, the jokes would be like, okay, everyone, put your hands on your head. All right, now lift it up out of your ass and answer the question. Okay? I love
I
this
think
guy.
one of the big things in the deterioration of education is definitely the fact that there aren't. Well, I mean, it's always been a problem that there are so few people who are actually born teachers. Like that teacher is
Right.
somebody who was born to teach. Like, you know, it's
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
in the way that they go about their everyday life. Like, you know, when you're like, my mum was just a born teacher. She taught you when she was just having a conversation with you about anything. You felt like
Yeah.
you're learning something. Like you're sat there like engaged, and you're like, oh, my mind is a sponge. Fill it, sort of thing. But there are so few of those people that actually exist in the teaching profession. They're still out there. They're just not teaching
Well,
necessarily. And that's what I think that's a big problem, where there's no people who don't have the passion to do it anymore, to actually engage kids in it and actually want them to learn.
Well, it's again ignoring the activist teachers and stuff. The problem, I think, and this has
Yeah.
always been a real thing, the teachers who I always got along and always learned most and always was most successful with were not the ones that were a little harder on the students, but was real with us.
Yes, that's
Who always tried to encourage real critical thinking.
Yeah.
I literally had a teacher throw out the textbook that he was like he only had them because he was forced to get a textbook. You know?
Yeah, that definitely makes me think of some teachers I had too. Like again, this AP literature teacher, I'm gonna reference him again because he's awesome. His name was Mr. Fuck, it was something French. I can't remember it right now. But
Mr.
awesome
Fuck.
teacher. What I liked most about him was he actually did get along with his students and did tell jokes and everything. But he was so real to a point that there was actually a conversation we had about how a body, a corpse, would smell and look like and everything.
Well,
Like,
you know why a lot of those teachers don't exist though? Why it's so rare to actually have
it's
them?
controversial.
Yeah, parents would get mad.
Yes.
Seriously, let's actually let's all face the fact of the matter is that, like again, parents get mad when students actually have to deal with the real world.
This is the same teacher that said, by the way, we're gonna watch Shawshank Redemption in class.
Okay.
If you don't know that one, watch it. Watch it now.
Yep.
We
That's why I've
also
seen that one.
We also compared it to the book because, of course, AP Literature. But like he did a lot of different stories, and a lot of other things that were a lot different from other classes because he did what he wanted to do. He tossed out any given thing that he was supposed to do and said, "No, we're doing this." And he would sometimes even tell us that. That's how I know. He would say, "By the way, we were supposed to do this, but no, we're gonna be doing this."
Well, yeah, because what it is, I think a lot of people get into the swing of things. They have their stuff, and there's no deviation, right?
Right.
And again, as good as some of these classic books, which I do recommend, like Mice of Mice and Men and other really good books, the problem that we run into is that um you get into, like, especially in literature and stuff, what got me out of it and wanting, I wanted to write and everything like that, but why I started hating it was specifically because it became like, hey, fuck genre fiction. That's a big one, which is really funny because the most prominent and important, books and literature are all genre fictions. Seriously. You guys know that, right? Even the Odyssey is a genre fiction.
What's
Well, yeah.
genre fiction? What do you
Like a
mean?
western, so like westerns and stuff like that. They wanted to do a lot of non-fiction, like their whole thing was the classic arts. Like again, read Shakespeare. Shakespeare is really hard to read, and like not everyone
We did
understands it.
Shakespeare in AP.
But again, really take the time to learn Shakespeare, and honestly, yeah, it's kind of amazing how good those stories actually are. But the point of
Oh,
the genre
but
fiction is Lord of the Rings is a genre fiction. It's a fantasy, it's a high fantasy thing, right?
right.
But they criticize, like, there's an elitism within these fields, and like it really annoys me at the high level of that. And again, there is a thing for that, right? For like objective good and all this other stuff with these things.
There's
But
there's something which I've always thought was actually pretty interesting, which is how um a lot of there's a lot of elitism against certain types of
books, yeah,
books,
right.
but especially fiction, because it's not real ish. But meanwhile, there's the obvious examples of the Odyssey and so on, which are praised as must read books and so on.
Yeah.
But I've always thought it interesting that whenever you bring that point up, there's that
Side
look.
shuffling?
No, there's that look that you get from most teachers or most academics which say this sort of stuff. When you point out that a lot of those things are technically fiction,
Yeah.
there's always that moment when you can feel that they just went in their minds that this guy went there.
Right.
They
Right.
know it's coming, and they have no way of saying you're wrong.
How do you explain? So if these are the things that are like the most important, then why is it that actually watching Jordan Peterson, it's fascinating hearing him talk about stories and stuff like that, because one of his favorite stories is Pinocchio. And again, a lot of these books that are fiction are more real in a lot of ways and explore the human condition But you remember, that's
Yep.
the whole thing with elitism, is they're talking
That's
about
because
human
it's
condition.
fiction.
And it allows it to
The
explore it in a way. And
yeah,
yet,
the value of fiction is that it's not bound by reality. So you can adjust the setting, you can adjust everything to fit the message.
well, not only
And
that,
the
though.
better you are at writing, the
Yeah.
more it is consistent and the better the message comes through. Pinocchio is a good example.
Oh yeah,
You lie too
absolutely.
much, you have a bad time.
Yep.
That's why fables are always such a big thing for kids to learn.
Yeah.
So
Grimm's fairy tales are fantastic, and I would
Oh,
highly advise
yes.
any parent to make sure that they read Grimm's fairy tales to their child as bedtime stories. Not when they're too
The
young, because
new
it's
ones or the
terrifying
old
to an
ones?
It's slightly older. When you get to about sort of 6 or 7,
No,
just
I
because
mean the revised stories which have the not so grim endings, or
No,
the
I-
original ones which
No,
the
the whole
original
thing.
kind
ones,
of like
the original ones, because I don't think that anyone should be softened up in this world. I think that's what half the fucking problem
Yeah,
is.
the
No,
original ones are
I
fun.
think we mollycoddle everyone nowadays.
Yeah.
Like, oh
But,
bless you, oh bless you. No, we actually like. It's still a tough world, and all these old morals still actually have some bearing in the current age, regardless of how far we think that we've progressed, because we haven't.
yeah, like the
Funny enough,
funnily enough, the original Grimm's fairy tales remind me of Junji Ito,
I can see
which
that.
has some. His stuff is like off the wall, and funnily enough, there is a meme which compares what Junji Ito writes about and how he is in real life, and what Miyazaki writes about and how he is in real life. And it's like polar opposites. Junji Ito writes about all the most fucked up shit, and he's like a nice guy in real life. He's happy and so on. Miyazaki is the complete opposite. He makes those like wonderful worlds, all colorful and shit, and the guy isn't particularly happy.
you know, it's kind of funny that you guys are talking about that, because I'm conflicted on this part. I personally think that reading the revised, because again, I think, at least for me, reading Grimm's fairy tales, like the original, was much later in my life. I actually still really like the revised versions, partly growing up with them and stuff like that, and then learning the actual tales as I got older. And you have to remember what the Grimm, and again, you got to remember that the Grimm fairy tales are themselves stolen from the original fables and made darker. Just to point that out to you guys,
Yeah, a lot. I think a lot of the
and modernized to a different to their period.
yeah, I think to some point a lot of stories, a lot of old stories are adaptations of older folk stories that got passed
Yeah.
down orally.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole point of the fairy tales, wasn't it? It was like, so they travelled around. The Brothers Grimm travelled around, and they did put together an anthology of all the local sort of like
Yep.
as they stood at the time, sort
Yep.
of that, and then maybe embellished them, as you say,
We
to add a modern
know they
twist.
embellished them. We absolutely know they
Yep.
embellished them. They wrote
The-
Grimm's fairy tales.
Yeah, like the I think that's why there's the I think that's why there's the saying, the moral of the story.
Yep.
Because all the stories have that point, that central point. That's where people should be focusing their attention on.
But
No, yeah.
But even when it comes to the Grimm fairy tales, they're not the only fables that like I said, I recommend diving into fables and from the Grimm's fairy tales to there, because there's so many of these good stories. You know, both lighthearted, because you do need both the lighthearted, and I think that was my whole thing with it. Is like you need the lighthearted and dark grimness. You know, it's actually why I think Grimdark, like, even though Grimdark draws people to it, which Grimdark means like everything is shit, have to
Nothing.
have some levity. have to
I
have
think
some
that
hope.
I don't think grimdark means everything is shit. I think grimdark means the environment is overwhelmingly stacked against the protagonist.
Yeah, but it also, even if it's that, no, grimdark usually also grimdark stories are also the ones that end badly. Like,
Nothing ever gets
yeah,
better.
yeah, it's because again, that's why it's called the grim dark. And again, going back to grim fairy tales all are really dark. Like, there is no success at the end of it. And again, those were supposed to be warnings of not doing things,
Yeah,
you know.
the moral of the story.
The problem is, as humans, we don't learn that way.
Uh
We learn things, but it again,
no,
it's
generally people only learn not to touch a hot stove when they touch the hot stove.
exactly.
It's kind of one of those things where it's like, you know, your whole life that curiosity kills the cat, but until you actually go out of your way and go, oh, I probably shouldn't, but I really want to know, and then you find out something that you really didn't want to know, and then you go, oh, and that's why curiosity killed the cat. So you can know the moral, but until you actually live it, then you go, oh, and that's why that was relevant to my life.
Oh
Yeah.
man. Oh
Yeah.
man. I think the
That's
big
why I
thing-
generally
yeah.
don't ask things and I just let people tell me things.
See, but here's the thing. If they say curiosity killed the cat, but again, going back to the original term for it, satisfaction brought it back. The whole point, without the curiosity, we wouldn't be where we are. Again, it's to, for some reason, the curiosity thing. For some reason, a lot of these old sayings have been turned to push you away from ideals that are very not only human but necessary. Without curiosity, we wouldn't be willing to explore. We wouldn't conquer the world.
See, now I'd never heard that the satisfaction brought it back. I've literally never heard that in my life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the whole saying.
That's the actual saying. That's the original saying.
A lot of these sayings have full versions of it that pretty much no one really
Or have-
knows.
All have been bastardized. It wasn't until in the last year, and I was reading. I wasn't reading. I was listening to the audiobook of. It'll come to me in a minute. But it was there's an old American bloke, at the river in Walden. Oh, I can't remember what it was called. It was about civil disobedience. Book on civil disobedience. And he was talking about it, and now I'm going to have completely forgotten my absolute point. Oh, that was it. The master of jack of all trades, master of none.
None.
I never ever realised that that is a bastardization of master of one, and that was a really endearing term until about 100 years ago when somebody decided to bastardize it.
Yep.
And then ever since then, it's been master of none instead of master of one. Which to me, jack of all trades, master of one, makes so much more sense because
No, that's not the bastardization. The bastardization is original term is jack of all trade, master of none, better than the master of. And the reason for that is it is better to be an overall skilled person than to limit yourself to one thing.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. To be a fulfilling person, you have to be able to have a skill set.
Yeah. Have a skill set, not have a skill.
Yep.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to the whole thing when people go to college. Do you know I tell a lot of people while they're in college to take a vocation? Go learn to be a mechanic while you're doing it. I know that's a lot of work, or take classes, because if the job you're doing now, if what you're wanting to do doesn't work out, get a good enough job until then.
Well, I've been pushing on my child who is making all the decisions now to try and go for a vocational, anything that he wants to do, no matter what it is. And he's not wanting to do necessarily trade stuff. He is wanting to do some slightly more things that traditionally he might have considered going to college and university for. I am pushing for him to try and get on-job training, do it vocationally, whatever it is that he wants to do. And he seems to have
yeah.
taken on that because I think that's the way that the world's going right now. I think that it's definitely time to stop putting money into universities and
Yeah.
colleges.
If he's going to go to college, it has to be an actual like really think about what
Law,
you know.
medicine.
Yeah.
Like,
But here's my whole thing about getting a trade. Here's the thing: you don't have to do a trade, but again, I think it's better to go take a class in carpentry, even if you don't, because it teaches you to do things with your hands. It teaches a skill set that will be helpful through life. You don't realize it at the time, right? But being
yeah.
34, like, ask how many people know how to change the oil in their car today. And that's my point, is there's a certain set of skills that would still benefit you, even if you don't have it there is nothing wrong with having a diverse skill set. That's why the jack of all trades bull, trying to make that bad, you know?
Yeah.
And the reason that says better than master of one, let's say you have a job, you have done nothing but this job, and you know no other skills, and you do that job. This is a thing that a lot of people do.
Well, this is the whole pipeline argument, isn't it, that Biden was having? Like, they can all learn how to code.
Damn it. Oh.
Sorry, I don't mean to bring it back to politics, but that is a
Yeah.
living, breathing example of exactly what you're saying, where people who have spent their entire lives working in one very specific, and overnight someone decides that it's obsolete and their job's gone. And then retraining somebody who has spent their whole life working in a specific field is a lot more difficult than having somebody who has picked up multiple skills along the way.
Yeah, that's why, and again, going back into the whole thing, this is why I'm always encouraging handyman things for men and women. Learn handyman. It might it might not seem like a thing, but having more thing, like, even though it's a physical task and stuff, it also teaches you a lot of things, things like, I know somebody who doesn't know shit about math, right? He knows how to make measurements and stuff with like a tape measure, right? He doesn't know anything, but he knows more things about plumbing and stuff like that, and can things that a lot of people can't do.
Yeah.
Because of the action of working and things and how they actually work in practice. Third grade education. I live in Kentucky. That's that. As much as that joke, that used to be a very common thing. He's 50 now, so. But the point I was trying to make, yeah, a lot of those things. Here's another one. Birds of a feather flock together. I know you've heard that one, right? You know what the full saying
Right.
is?
No.
Birds of a feather flock together until the cat comes out to play. And it's a thing about fair weather friends.
Right, okay.
This is actually why the whole thing probably is that you will find people, like, I think this makes a bigger argument of why having a diverse group of people and getting to know people, and and again, you'll know who sticks to you when when a problem comes along. The cat is a problem, but then everybody scatters. Nobody's there for you. So, yeah.
It's almost interesting because it's like, absurd reference. I don't know if you've ever caught Harmon Quest, which is
yeah, I know.
Yeah, and there's a particular episode where they've got Patton Oswalt on, and they do the joke of the half idioms, but and that's I'm like, do not judge, and then just like not and leaving it at the end of it, and it's like they've made a whole joke out of it, but in real life we have like just decided to bastardize and cut all of these idioms, these sort of like
well, they were bastardized
sayings that we used to direct us in life, and we've just gone, nah, we don't need the rest of that.
Hold on, but the thing is, the bastardization happened before we were
born.
Yeah. So again, the whole thing, and it's just a normal thing, is basically as society got better and everything like that, if you want, they took things that were about individualism. That's the thing about all these things. They come from these great ideas that are great lessons, and made it instead of the individual and the lessons of that, they turned it into the collective. Again, blood is thicker than water. No, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The relationships you choose to have and work towards are more important than those that you than just the ones that you were born with or told to have. And again, that does not mean you cannot love your family or be close to them. But how many people do you know who are not have good relationships with their families, yet have fantastic relationships? With people who are are any, and that's the point. That's what all these things you speak about.
Hmm.
And I think they're important lessons.
Yeah. So almost coming back to the point of the devolution of education, it's almost sad to say that we've come from a long line of such articulate and poetic people that we have all these beautiful idioms and sayings and phrases that perfectly capture the human syndrome and a condition and all that, and now we get to the point where it's like the best we can come up with is things like hate is gonna hate as cultural expression to try and
Yeah, I want to point out again, you have to think about this in context. We can look back at my education was great in at least in America, where like everyone's was different in that way, but you have to remember that everybody getting educated, everybody, is only 150-year-old thing.
Yeah, I know.
And even in England, like for vast, like even you getting an education, is only within like the last 100 years, because like you would get like yes, they were doing it where you've been getting an education and stuff in the time period, and women for education, but the point that I was trying, but again, you still had to have money most of the time. You had to be a certain social standard.
It was something I was going to say earlier when you were talking about the getting kids to read anything that engages them and all this sort of stuff. Is that we are burdened almost with an overabundance of reading materials for the simple fact that if you look at it 100 years ago, 120 years ago. So my voice is going a bit funny. But about 120 years ago, 100 years ago, we wouldn't. I wouldn't be able to access the books that I can access now at the click of a button. Even as a child, being able to go to a library, having a library almost in my own home, like there was just so much reading material, and it's not just that. Like you'd go to it was regular occurrence when we were kids to go down to the shop and pick yourself up, or have a weekly magazine or a monthly magazine delivered to your house. That wasn't necessarily like it could be comic books and fiction, or it could just be like a regular talking point magazine that's on a specific subject, whether it's music or your particular, if you're interested in all the human body things that were coming out all the time, and you'd dinosaur comic like magazines and stuff like that. There was so much stuff to read. It didn't necessarily matter if you weren't the sort of person to sit down and, like myself, sit down and go, I'm going to sit here and read a whole book, because I was reading all the time in every aspect of my life. It was just part of what we did because we had it there, and we were given the tools at such a young age to be able to read. It was like, when you Matilda, she was reading the back of the ingredients, like the ingredients on the back of the cereal packet and everything, just to be reading something. These are the things that we had access to as children. So we are burdened with an overabundance by comparison, and the average level of education is considerably higher. Just surprising that we are as a society full of so many idiots.
Well, I mean, but again, I hate saying this, but I also see this as being a form of the death of tradition in general. Like what I mean by that is pop culture and stuff like that is, when I've said this multiple times, but when I was a kid, I still was watching things from 70s, 60s, like everything Americana or even British, but like movies. I was surrounded, not just by books and everything like that. And then you get to this point, and most kids have never even half of the great movies, you know, that
He was
that shaped me.
incredibly surprised at the amount of knowledge I had, but also the random lacks of knowledge I had, given what I knew already.
Because we learn from
Well,
everything, and we learn from everything.
I mean, you are on the verge of setting me off on my one of my biggest rants, because having studied film, television, and journalism, all to graduate and undergraduate levels, in various subjects. Like, I'm passionate about. I always was passionate about the media. I've completely lost interest in it in a big way. But
Yeah.
my biggest gripe was that when creativity died, at the point when we had, and Ash may vaguely remember this, but there was such thing as the writers' strike in the early 2000s, which devastated the TV industry and the film industry, for writers, for the people who were coming up with the quality content. And at that point, they started employing people who were shit at their jobs, but also coming up with different ways to be able to produce content without writers, which is when reality TV kind of took off and became a really big thing. And reality TV, I stand by, is the death, the absolute death of creativity in the media. Just making sure you're still there. My phone's making all sorts of noises. But at the same time, now what the problem is for young people growing up in this is you have this abundance of media being shoved down your throat, of reality TV, of talentless people with very little personality, who are selling all the wrong things and who are desperate to become famous, who are being shoved down your throat constantly, with a complete void of true creativity 90% of the time. And the places that it is coming in are not through the mainstream media channels. No, and I think that is devastating for the culture, because right now there is such a lack of motivation for people to actually come up with original, talented ideas. And it's so easy for them to be able to replicate shit. Like this whole TikTok thing, like, I don't get TikTok anyway, and maybe that's just because I'm the generation that I am, and I'm just too fucking old for it. But the idea,
TikTok is also a death of this stuff, but I'll get into that in a minute.
but the
There's some good
idea that
stuff, but
you can do these videos, like the big thing on there where you do these videos where you've got sound bites from popular TV or media or music, and then you've got people like lip syncing to them, and it's like, there has never been a time in history when there has been any need for that. Like, all you're doing is rehashing shit that we already know. Like, and it's just narcissism at its absolute worst. And I just don't understand how you've got people who are becoming successful, popular, making money off of this. Like, and that, the more you do that, the more you funnel the money into it, the more mainstream it becomes, and the more that becomes part of the culture. So that's the sort of talent pool we're headed for, And it's like, don't get me wrong, it makes it easier for good people to shine, but there is so much crap out there that these young people are consuming. When do they have the time? If no one's sat there pointing out all these classic movies, these classic books, these classic TV series, when are they going to have the time to find it? Because they've got so much shit being shoveled down their throats constantly, 24/7.
Can I tell you the two failures? Can I tell you what makes the difference between probably weird kids and what they're going through now?
Tell me.
At least when I was a kid, this was a very common thing in the 90s. I was dinner at the table, right, with my family, or sometimes we would sit in the living room, watch movies. My parents were how I found this.
Yeah.
Again, it was everything. My grandparents. Again, the reason I got my love for like Bonanza and the westerns, right, shows that I liked as a kid, was my grandparents loved them. I watched Matlock with my mom. Like, yes, that's old television, but in the night. The thing is all the stuff that I would watch, like we would always do movie night, always things, and there was a lot of crap. As much as there, like, again, there's probably more movies I don't remember because they weren't that good versus movies
Yeah.
but then and then I met people. Like, again, it's the whole thing is that the Americana was everywhere, but now since we're all plugged in online and YouTube, let's actually play this correctly. YouTube has changed the and Netflix,
Yeah.
where they can anything on. So it's hard to expand to things, but again, it's a very simple thing. If you want, but again, if you want people to see this stuff, you have to, parents have used more and more and more the babysitting
Yeah.
of the computer. We're all hooked up to this stuff. Like with my daughter, you can ask Ashley. When I have my daughter, I'll put on a movie she has never seen. With my, she's 13 now, so I have a lot more movies I can show her. That that and it's really interesting hearing her talk it out and figuring out like the themes, stuff like that from her perspective. And again, these movies are not going to be important to her right now. Same with me when I was a kid. Most of these movies weren't important to me until I was older. I knew I liked them, but it's my job to show that to them.
Yeah.
But most people don't see that anymore, and they don't see that the death of culture is literally the lack of culture.
Yeah.
But this is just me being, well, me. And I do think that plays a big part in it. And yeah, I get a lot of pushback, a lot on this stuff, but again, it's really fascinating how much I have introduced people to great movies, great ideas, to great things over my last 10 years of meeting people who had never seen any of this stuff, and how much it really affects and changes points,
Yeah.
And again, we're on the hyper consumption. Again, another thing with a lot of people, we're on hyper consumption. So sometimes they'll see something and they won't actually like, it's easy to consume a lot of real quick sound bites and stuff like that. For quite a few of these things, again, going back to Shawshank Redemption. Shawshank Redemption is straight up one of the greatest movies made, and I will fight anyone about it. But
it would be a worthy fight as well.
But it is a movie that requires your actual attention.
Oh, absolutely. As do a lot of the movies from around, some of the epics from around that period. Like Fight Club is a fucking epic, a phenomenal sort of introspective movie where you literally spend half the movie wondering what the hell is going on. But my God, what a movie it is, and yet, like, you just can't.
You could see him.
Oh my gosh, I have to talk a little bit about Fight Club because my biggest problem with people when it comes to Fight Club. Most people who've seen it only care about the twist. That's the reality of it, right?
Yeah.
It's a good movie, and they don't comprehend what the movie's actually about. And it literally, the whole point of Fight Club is the loss of masculinity.
Oh yeah, I was going to say it's this whole midlife crisis that he's going through, where he's actually like he is really going through something. Like, regardless of whether you think that he's got this friend going through life with him, that's like just going, oh yeah, let's do everything. Regardless, even the fact that he's in that position is a sign that he is a man who is on the edge.
But think about, but it's more about the sayings and some of the stuff that happened. Think about this. The snowflake line comes from it, right? Because he hits him with lice, but the fucking acid, right?
Yeah.
And it's burning through his skin. And he's like, "We're not a special snowflake," but we're a bunch of men raised by women. Where is our war? It is the lack of purpose. It is the lack of masculinity. It is the being pushed away, what happens when a bunch of, again, what is the crime? What is the crime for betraying them? They take your balls. Literal emasculation. Think about when we first meet the character. He goes to a testicular cancer place to sleep, to get rest. Meets Bob at one of these,
Mm,
It's so, and it's more prominent now with what the actual messaging
yeah.
and the dangers of ignoring these things. And and again, the movie's great all the way around, but what is actually being said is important.
But that's what I mean, is that this is something that we've definitely lost in the last 20 years in filmmaking and television making, is this ability to tell stories where you are telling a story that is riveting and thought provoking and has you on the edge of your seat. But no matter how many times you break it down, it takes you to a new place and a new level of understanding where it's actually like a real, like Happy was saying earlier, like fiction sometimes allows you, like, no, some of these sort of, like, yes, it's fiction, but it's non-fiction, it's based in the real world. These sorts of stories that we used to come up with that was so brilliant and said so much about the human condition and what it is to be human and understanding ourselves, and that really introspective look at yourself through all of these broken mirrors that is this one film and this one fucking narrative that takes you to all these different places. We've lost the ability to do that somehow in film, and that really, it's really like that. I can't wait to be disappointed by Matrix Resurrections. Like, that's the first. It's the first movie I've actually got excited about in probably like 6 or 7 years, and I'm just like, I'm looking at it going like, I'm so excited, and oh, it's gonna break my heart. It's gonna fucking break my heart because I haven't seen anything in a long time that's actually made me think any further than the actual movie itself. Like, nothing that's been produced new. I mean, like, obviously there's still a wealth of old stuff to go back in the treasure trove to pick through, but
Right. Have you actually watched Ink yet?
no, I was been waiting for you to tell me off of this because I keep thinking about it and then not getting around to putting it on.
Maybe, like I said, I think a big thing for like new movies, I do find them every so often, but there are a number of good movies because of the technology and stuff today that are low budget.
Yeah.
And I have always said this, and people have said this before, but it's really there are a number of great foreign films that do what America does. So they still exist. They just don't exist here.
The subtitles. I know it's so lazy of me, but when you just get so, I want to enjoy all the visual aspects of it as well as being able to. I want to fully immerse myself in the experience, and I can't do that when I'm reading subtitles because I'm like, it takes me a while. I'm a slow reader. I read and I get there, but I'm a slow reader, and sometimes subtitles move too fast for me to be able to do both at the same time.
Which is sad because I have two phenomenal Korean films that one of them got remade, and I tell everyone, do not watch the Spike Lee version of. Need to see.
The Old Boy. I have watched Old Boy, the original Old Boy, and oh my god, what a film! Like, what I mean, my head hurts so much after watching that movie.
I watched it again last year. I hadn't seen it in a while. I watched it, and earlier this year I watched the other one I'm about to tell you. And it's called I Saw the Devil.
Right, okay.
It stars the same actor who played the main character in Old Boy.
He was brilliant.
The serial killer in I Saw the Devil.
Okay.
And what the movie is, kills a woman, who ends up being the special agent wife, pregnant. And what he
Right.
does is he finds the guy, beats the shit out
No
of him.
spoilers.
No. I'm just telling you the opening because the movie. This is just the synopsis. I can tell you what happens
Right.
after this. But he finds the guy, the crap out of him, puts a tracker in him, and then lets him go and just keeps hunting him throughout the whole movie.
Mm.
I do not
Wow.
want to tell you anything else about the film. I hope
Yeah,
you have
no,
a
don't.
stomach for gore.
No, I really don't. I have to say it's one of the things I struggle with, which is one of the reasons why Old Boy stuck out so much in my mind. Because there are moments in that where it comes out of nowhere.
No.
It literally comes out of nowhere and you're watching it and you're like, why? There's a
But if
scene,
you
that's it. You
but if
know
you
the
took
scene that
that
I'm
out,
talking about
yeah,
at the
yeah.
end.
But if
When
you took
when
that
it,
out, if you took that out, it would change the whole film.
oh yeah, absolutely. But I remember getting to that point and just being like, why are we watching this? This is so horrible. And I get it. And I understand. I mean, like, I've only got a vague memory of the actual movie myself now. It's been so many years since I watched that movie because I remembered it just being like, every time it comes up, I'm like, you should watch that film. That is a fucking great film. I'm not going to watch that film.
Let's talk about one of the most technical scenes, though, that people have tried to replicate, but it's so hard to replicate. And it's it's just the form, that fucking hallway fight.
I was literally just going to
nobody.
say the corridor. That corridor.
There,
Oh my god.
it's all one shot.
I
It's
know.
all one shot. And what makes it special, which is what nobody else has ever gotten. Not only does it feel realistic, it's very sloppy. That's why it feels like an actual fight.
Yeah.
It is not this highly, choreographed thing. Everyone's getting tired. Remember, you're literally watching him get tired. And this,
Yeah.
it's not long. It's only like 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. It's not a long scene.
No.
It's so
It felt like
impactful.
it was a long scene.
Yeah, but it's so impactful. It's so impactful.
Yeah.
I do have one thing to say though that was really frustrating for me, as being a John Woo fan, and the classic Hong Kong action films.
Right.
I was talking to a guy who did not know who Chow Yun-fat was, thought he was a nobody. We were talking about a different movie, but thought he was a nobody. Chow Yun-fat.
Sorry, how old was this person though?
He was 21. He was 21.
Right, so he wasn't old enough to have been sort of like really with it when Crouching Tiger came out, because Jesus Christ, the whole world
so
lost
great.
its fucking mind over that movie. The whole world. And I remember it being one of the first times that we sat there, me and my family sat there for 3 straight hours, just like nothing's happening, just fucking move. It was so good.
Oh man. Out of the but yeah, so you have Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but I want to point out he was already famous before that movie came out. He was specifically but that movie sold a bunch of great actors.
Yeah.
Oh man.
That was like the sealing the deal of a lot of people for international superstardom.
Chow Yun-fat already had a major hit, because of John Woo. Fucking Hard Boiled, one of the greatest gunfight movies ever made.
I don't think I've ever seen it.
You need to.
I showed her the movie. it's you can get it in English. You don't have to watch it in but you have to remember that it was made in the 90s. So the voiceovers are like old Jackie Chan voiceover movies.
Fantastic. That's the kind of kung fu I like.
But there's how Old Boy had that really phenomenal thing there? There is also a gunfight near the end of the film in this one that is all one shot. And you don't realize it.
Okay, I'm down for that.
It also created Gung Fu, basically.
We really need a movie night.
We do.
I'm down for it.
You can even bring Alex, 'cause I'm pretty sure he probably likes old action movie, like good action movies. Got to. There's no way I can't believe you. There's no way
But
I
you know,
believe this.
select old movies though. You'd be surprised what the sort of old movies that he likes. Like, but yeah, no, I don't think we watch too much old stuff to be honest. So we watch a lot of current affairs at the moment, so I've not been watching a great deal of movies.
Well, I have three. I do have 3 movies that I would love to watch with you guys. If not that, bring your son. It'll be fine. But it's the 3 movies. It's called we need to watch Hardboiled. We need to watch the John Woo trilogy with Chow Yun-fat. Hardboiled, Killers, and what was the third? What was the other one? We just watched a thing on it. The one where he's not the main character, but
Who's like, no.
No. Anyways, the third
We'll
film,
figure it out.
and you can actually see the rise of gun kata, gun fu fighting, and how what changed gunfights forever in Hollywood actually came from John Woo's of directing action and gunfights. That's why they became so kinetic because if you go back in the old day, how did gunfights happen? You see somebody pull the gun, they would shoot, then it would turn to the next person, and the person would fall over dead, right? John Woo actually created the whole shooting somebody in scene.
Right, okay.
And the funny thing about how he shoots action, I never thought about this because I always wondered why it looks so cool. It's because the gun is a sword in John Woo films. So it's not that they shoot the gun; they literally punch the gun forward, like they're actually hitting somebody harder with it.
Right, yeah.
They are really the bullets only do as much damage as.
That little extra nudge makes all the difference.
Then go back to all 90s films. That is how gunfights are. That's how gunfights became.
Yeah, and that's what people think that gunfights are.
But it did make them more exciting. It does. It is because again, what is the whole thing you have? You have the whole thing where the guy gets angry, and he comes out and suddenly his bullets are hitting every fucking part. You know what I mean, right? Like,
yeah,
it's the Tombstone no moment. No.
The funniest thing is all I can hear in the back of my head is my old college lecturer saying that every movie you have ever seen is a western. The narrative structure comes down to it. It is a western. Every movie ever made is really a western. And that was like the base point of him teaching narrative theory and narrative structure for the 2-year course that I had him for. It always came back to that, and it was like such a bitter argument that I would have with him because I was like, no, actually I think you would find that they're based on like all movies are Greek fucking legends. Because every movie, even all narrative structure comes down to sort of like the Homers. Yeah.
You can make the argument for I think that everything comes from different, but you can actually make the argument that most movies come from the monomyth more than anything else, which doesn't require from Greek to any culture,
Yeah.
Again, all the greatest stories are told from the monomyth, from movies like Star Wars to Lord of the Rings, It always
Iliad, Homer's Iliad. Sorry, the word came to me. I had to say it.
Yeah. But I would actually argue that I actually think I agree with him for modern storytelling, though.
Well, he was saying films specifically, all films, except that because the first ever film with any kind of narrative structure to it was The Great Train Robbery. That all films, as a result, have been modelled in some way from that. Like that is the basis for all movies. So yeah.
No, I
It
disagree
was
with that.
it. Yeah, I disagreed with it to great length, and it was the source of many great debates between myself and him. But that was the story that he stuck to.
But starting from the 50s, and I actually argue that Western is what inspired the later modern storytelling, though. Hear me out on this one. Because, you know who Kurosawa is, right? Akira Kurosawa? The guy who created the greatest samurai stories? His
Right,
filmmaking.
okay.
So he created Yojimbo, Seven Samurai,
Right,
Ran,
okay, yeah.
and again, these are movies that inspired his filming. Inspired movies like this, or Repoffs actually, Fistful of Dollars.
Yeah.
We're going into westerns. He was inspired by American western from the 40s and 30s, because westerns used to be very popular. And then you throw in noir and other stuff, obviously, of the time period. So it's a mixture of it. But he took the western and created samurai flicks. And then so stories basically took from those concepts for modern storytelling a lot of times.
But I suppose that's when you look at it culturally, because it was another thing that we did was looking at sort of Eastern to Western culture. Like, you have to understand, like, with Eastern culture, there's so many core differences in the way that they view men and women in their society, and certain people in their society, and the classes in their society, and the whole idea of the samurai being this sort of like one person that is stronger and mightier than all the rest, and he stands by his honors and his laurels. Like, that is probably more prominent an idea that comes across in the cowboy representation from Western
Well,
media
yeah,
from that point in time than any other sort of media form. So I can understand why at that point in time he would be most inspired by the Western side of things, because I would say that it probably reflects the aspects that he wants to sort of like promote from their culture, sort of thing more.
white hats versus black hats, and
Yeah,
specifically the most popular Western time, which he would have he grew up with, was the Lone Ranger.
yeah, there you go.
So in his films, they're obviously more violent and stuff like that. But yeah, it's kind of funny is that Kurosawa was more inspired, like he used Japanese culture, but he was more inspired storytelling and stuff wise by Western culture. This is why filmmaking is why I this whole thing about like how people view making films and stuff is so fucking weird to me, because the concept of inspired by multiple different cultures and taking different ideals is what created some of the greatest storytellings, even in other cultures.
Well, it's how film as a medium came together in its entirety. Because people, there were like three different people developing the film camera in three different parts of the world, and they kind of like the ideas, once they started spreading, sort of amalgamated together. But the techniques that were used and stuff like that, you didn't see editing. Like, you're talking like World War Two, World War One, like it's sort of like that 1920s period when it was just peaking off, and all the different techniques. Like, yeah, you didn't see sort of like editing coming until the Russians did it. The French were the first ones to sort of start capturing, like the English and the French were doing the daily life sort of things, like just capturing daily life, and the Americans were the ones who were doing the big sort of like, oh, I still love the story of the first time when they just did it's a train coming into the station.
Yeah.
And they said that when they were, it was like 5 cents for a ticket, and people sat in there and they literally ran out because of the screening, because they thought a train was literally coming towards them, because the concept of film just hadn't sunk in yet. Like, it was just something so simple. So yeah, just the medium of film itself is an amalgamation of cultures, like, all coming together to try and get an idea into one point of conception.
It was definitely America though that had the biggest. Again, this is America. It was the biggest techniques, which is really fascinating. Is another film that inspired Kurosawa was Orson Welles' Citizen Kane.
Right, yeah.
Because that movie created so many techniques for filming, right? And then
Oh yeah.
Kurosawa created a whole new other set and inspired and basically the thing is all going back to westerns and stuff in Kurosawa, going from that you go from western mixing in with like movies like Kane and film shooting to samurai flicks back to western. Then everything about those film skills went into everything else. So there's an argument there for everything modern being started from the western.
Yeah.
But not the storytelling. That's the part I disagree heavily. But just from the what inspired filmmaking. Where do these ideas come from?
No, I still say that. Well, yeah, no, you're right. The structure would come from earlier. I was about to make a completely void argument, so I'm just gonna not say anything. So,
Again, if you think about these things, like when he said that, I was like, I disagree. But then there's this something about like, again, I know enough about film history to understand what each step took.
yeah,
And what's funny is that Kurosawa, there was a few other pretty decent. There's still some pretty decent Japanese directors, but Kurosawa is probably the only like legitimately phenomenal director from. He was instrumental to all of Western, and a lot of us didn't realize it.
yeah.
And I want to point out, I actually don't like Citizen Kane the movie. Never have. I find the movie pretty boring overall.
I was gonna say I don't think I've ever made it all the way through.
Yeah. So, anyways, he probably should go ahead and get shut down now. It's
I was
time.
gonna say we
I don't
lost
even know
Happy along the
exactly-
way somewhere.
Oh, he must have lost
Yeah.
power.
I noticed when he left.
Yeah, he probably lost power and everything
He
like that.
did.
But
He got taken by the storm.
yeah. But this was a lot of fun. We got onto a bunch of different topics and stuff like that. And of course, we couldn't stick to the actual topic we wanted to talk about. That's pretty.
We sort of touched
Yeah.
back on it in various ways.
Yeah.
I kept thinking, like, there were various points where I was like, that's kind of what we were talking about. Start with.
And again, I want to go into actually going back to another thing, but we were talking about culture and stuff like that. Is like the movies that are about like the strong men and stuff like that. Also, robbed. We go back to these films we're talking about. Going back to the samurai and those things like Fistful of Dollars in the Western, about men, yes, who have to do hard things, but they have a moral code and strength and they protect people. You know what I mean? Shows
Yeah.
cunning and yeah, weird, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe we're just getting old. Maybe that's still we're just at that point where I'm like, it's not like when I was a kid.
Actually, this is the normal degradation of culture, though. That's the sad part of it.
Yeah, I feel like it's that fourth turning point. The good times breed weak men. Unfortunately, that's where I feel like that.
No, I think it. I don't. I think it.
Yeah, the men was a generalization. I forget you get cancelled nowadays. Weak people.
No. But I think it's just weak in general. Because it's it's not like the reason I say it that way. Specifically, like I know we're talking about men and having all these problems and being ignored, but it is straight up just people. Because if you want to talk about women, where are the women? Like again, if feminism is about both sexes, where are the women? Or men's issue, watching their sons. Like again, I would figure this would matter a lot to you, your son. We don't want these again. We don't want this to happen. We don't want to go back. Like I said, we don't want a bunch of dude bros or anything like that. But we do want masculine, protective, strong, and healthy men, right?
Yep.
Because again, a society cannot. And here's the reason it should matter the most to women right now. is specifically because you now have a fuck ton of women who can't find guys.
Because they're
Yeah.
not even guys. What?
That's fair.
I hear that.
It's true.
No, I
Yeah.
had a rule back a long time ago when I was dating. My rule was if he spends more time on his appearance getting ready for a night out than I do, and it's not worth it. And that's a real problem. I mean, I don't know. You know, I'm not in a city. I'm in a fairly built up area. There's a big
Yeah.
nightclub culture here, but yeah, there's definitely even the sort of like lads. You know, they spend an awful lot of time in the shops buying their clothes and making themselves look nice and making themselves smell nice and everything. Some of them even wear makeup. Yeah, you gotta believe it. You literally.
I mean, I'm just saying, if you're in the metal
Yes.
scene, you have to expect guys to be wearing guy liner. It's
Yeah.
just the
Yeah, I'm
that-
not talking
that's-
about the
that's a
metal scene.
must, okay.
I'm not
mean-
talking about the metal scene. I grew up in that scene, and I'm used to guys wearing eyeliner. I'm not used to guys wearing foundation and like eyebrow filler. Like
Ooh.
that's weird.
I will
Like-
say, I have learned the lesson of lotion though. Didn't realize that's really popular in the black community.
Yeah, no, I know. Bill Burr has informed me about it.
Yeah, but no, Brad and Lex talked about it too.
Yeah, no, I
You
know.
guys did
No,
not-
they.
Yeah, I had no idea. I had no idea for a long time that was a thing, and I'm like, and there is something for it. I will say, I never. But
Oh yeah,
I don't
no, the phrase. Ever since watching Bill Burr, the phrase, and feel free to look it up. Oh, you ashy motherfucker, comes up in our house quite a bit actually.
Oh wow.
The thing that I have though is I don't like constantly using my feet or hands, because I don't need to be having soft hands.
No,
Calluses build up. So, you want to build. You don't want to get rid of the parts that actually are helpful.
no.
But
No, I've got lady hands. Anyway,
yeah, but no, this was fun. I think we got onto a really interesting, fun topics, and
Yeah.
and I wanted to make up for last week, just pretty much a fuck off stream because we were all sick. So
Yeah. And I didn't fall asleep this time.
hopefully next time when we do the topic, I'll be able to get a hold of everybody because I actually had a video I wanted you guys to watch before it was a live Jordan Peters.
Right,
thing
okay.
where we talked about it, but so I'm gonna start. Well, we'll talk more about that. That's thing. Anyways, let's go ahead and start ending the stream. All right. Well, anyone listening to this now or listening to this later, thank you for coming and hearing us all out. Any last words, guys?
Nah.
Okay.
Be good to one another and party on, dudes.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Yep. All right. So, well, this was Morgan. Say bye, Morgan.
Ta-ra!
Ash.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys for coming to Spoken Word with Braz. Please subscribe, share, whatever, if you're really liking the content. And everybody again soon. Anyways, have a good one. We are out.
Bye.